Hey everybody, it is Terenzo here. Welcome to a new series I'm starting on exploring the Tekken canon. I know that some people say fighting game stories are stupid and you shouldn't pay attention to them, and those people are probably right. However, I am stupid and I do pay attention to them as well as play them competitively, particularly Tekken. Now, different game series have done this differently through the years. If you are a young lad or lass, you may be wondering what the deal is because you picked up Tekken 7 and you saw right there in the menu it said Story Mode. And you played that awful Tekken 7 Story Mode, and now you understand the story that Tekken 7 was trying to convey. Unfortunately, it has not always been that easy. Back in the days when tournament fighters were relegated mainly to the arcades, and you had an arcade mode and you had a brief small section of memory that you could put some sort of ending for the character in, developers chose to do all sorts of things. Sometimes it was a what-if scenario if your character had won whatever tournament or event was taking place. Sometimes it was just a little vignette about the character and their life. Sometimes you didn't get an ending at all until the console version, which was the case with Tekken. The arcade versions contained minimal story content. But what we're going to do is take a look, starting with Tekken 1. This video will just be Tekken 1. We're going to look at all the CGI movies in the game, and we're going to figure out the best we can which ones are canon and which ones are not. Now, I want you to take a look at this spreadsheet I made. I'll remove this when we get to watching the videos. But you can see, I hope you can see this right. I've got all the movies listed here on the left. I've got the type of ending, and I've got the canonicity over here on the right, and then a section for notes. And so down here at the bottom, I have three categories that we're going to try to put these endings into. They are vignette. If you don't know what that word means, it's kind of like a slice of life, a little story, or just like an event in somebody's life. You'll understand what I mean as we get into these endings. It's basically endings that is just something that shows something happening to the character. It doesn't necessarily mean like, oh, they won the King of Iron Fist tournament, so now this is what's happening. It's just like a slice of their life. If you need an immediate example of this, think of Bruce Irving's ending in Tekken 2, I would say. There is a what-if ending. Most all of these are going to be non-canon. These are just endings that are basically like, you beat the game with this character. Here's what would have happened had that character been successful in their endeavor, whatever their reason was for being in the tournament. And then there's a conclusion ending, which is pretty much always going to be canon. And those sound very similar to what-ifs, because a what-if is a type of conclusion. It's just usually not a canonical one. But you'll see that. You'll get into that later. Basically, storyline characters, like main story Mishima characters, will have conclusion type endings. But anyway, today we're just going to do Tekken 1 because that's gonna take as long as possible. Anyway, so let's drop that window and let's start with the Tekken 1 intro. This is a classic intro. I had to turn my own volume up there. So this is just a classic intro. I mean, this was some cutting edge stuff at the time. This looks extraordinarily dated now. Very goofy. Look how Nina runs in this opening section. It's extremely goofy. Paul looks okay. That one looks okay. And I think Kazuya's here. It looks decent. Punching a candle, that's an old karate cliche. But the early Tekken game intros are usually just kind of a setup to show you who the characters are and what they are. I'm going to say this one, we'll just call it a vignette. I mean, most of these intro type things are going to be that because they are basically slices of the events of these characters' lives that show you why, not even really why they want to enter the tournament, just kind of the people that they are. So we'll say that it is canon. I know it's kind of silly to put the intro movie as canon, considering it's just kind of a cool intro movie. But I do think that all of that stuff is probably legitimately things that happened to those characters. So we'll put that under canon. Now let's go to the arcade opening. This one's going to be very quick, very brief. This is what played in the arcade, like in the attract mode. If you played Tekken 1 in the arcades, the cabinet will repeat this every so often. And it's pretty much just Kazuya being mad. It's really even dumb of me to put this in here because like this is, you know, did Kazuya do those moves in practice at some point? Yeah, I'm sure he did, but that was more just like we didn't have time to put a full intro movie in this thing, so here's Kazuya, the main character of this game, doing some stuff. We'll just call it another vignette. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that word right. I know it's not vignette. I think it's vignette. Not French, okay? I don't know. Whoops. So we'll call it Canon. We'll put that in the Canon category. So let's go over to KAZUYA MISHIMA. This is the dreaded smile that rung through the Tekken community. But anyway, take a look at this. And again, this is very primitive, but for the time, this was cutting edge stuff. This is basically the same as the stage technology in the game. It's just like a flat plane and then they put like a JPEG in the background. And the creepy smile. So let's go back to our spreadsheet. I think you guys all know this is a definitive conclusion ending. This is the canon ending to Tekken 1. Kazuya canonically wins Tekken 1. The intro story to Tekken 2 confirms it. So this is a conclusion type ending. It's 100% canon. I think this definitely happened. Multiple Tekken, future Tekken stuff confirms this. So let's check out Paul Phoenix's ending. I've always wondered what that is in the background. It looks like a train or something. I don't know. Oos! And so Paul is punching through a brick wall. That's Kazuya's picture on it. For you guys that just jumped on with like Tekken 6 or so, Paul used to not be a joke character. Paul was like a serious Tekken character. If you see Tekken old heads like myself, most of us will lament the loss of Paul as a main storyline character. This is in the instruction booklet. You know, the Mishimas are usually untouchable. But in the instruction booklet of Tekken 1, it's mentioned that Paul Phoenix fought Kazuya to a draw at some point before the first Tekken. And that was the only blemish on either of their records, as they couldn't defeat each other. So in the early game, like that was Paul's objective, was to find Kazuya and avenge that loss, because he was on equal footing with a Mishima. That's how good Paul is. Paul actually defeats Ogre in Tekken 3. We'll talk about that when we do Tekken 3. But for whatever reason, Harada and gang, when they kind of took over, they just relegated Paul to joke character status. Mainly after the time skip, which was basically another Harada decision, I think, to make Jin old enough to fight without having you beat up on a kid. They had to make everybody really old. And so Paul was kind of a serious Paul was kind of a casualty of that. Anyway, let's go back to our chart. I'm going to say this is canon because in the early games, he was trying to defeat KAZUYA. And this is just a little slice of life story. This is Paul training to defeat KAZUYA. There is nothing in the rest of Tekken canon that makes it so this ending can't happen. So we're going to say that it did. That at some point Paul actually did this and like punched through a brick wall with KAZUYA's face on it, because that's kind of stuff Tekken 1 Paul would do back before he was a loser. Anyway, let's check out Law's ending. Flip kicks are a big thing in Law's early endings. He basically does these. And like all his students look on in awe. So we need to go back to Tekken Wiki and do a little reading here for Tekken 1. Let's see. Law's story, per the Tekken Wiki. Law worked in a Chinatown restaurant while dreaming of opening his own martial arts school. He took part in the King of Iron Fist tournament to open his own school with the prize money, while at the same time making himself famous. So it would seem to imply that this ending is saying that martial law has his dojo. However, let's look at the Tekken 2 intro. His Tekken 2 story states, in the previous tournament, Law would draw against an old man named Wang Jinrei, which is, of course, his sub-boss in this game. Law would go home and almost felt hopeless after he failed in winning. However, the Manji leader Yoshimitsu came storming into Law's poor neighborhood and gave money to Marshall and the other poor residents within the area. Law would use the money he received and fulfilled to open his own dojo. Blah, blah, blah. Law ran his own dojo. Unfortunately, his students were severely attacked and injured by a taekwondo teacher who is participating in the King of Iron Fist Tournament 2. Law decides to enter the tournament to avenge his students. Let's see. And then version 2 of his story also says that he has the restaurant. So let's go back to our document. If you look at Historicum Tekkenus, the big document that's on GameFAQs that everybody took as Tekken canon for years, I think it says this ending is non-canon because, like, oh, Law didn't win the tournament. However, if we look at Yoshimitsu's ending, which we will in just a bit, we can understand why Law has this dojo. So again, old fighting game stories. A lot of the times, every ending in the game would be like what happened if your character won. However, in the sequel, because only one character could win the tournament, they would kind of tweak it so that all the events of the other characters' endings happened, but just without them winning the tournament. So I think this is a case of that, where Law, he managed to get his dojo because that's the whole reason for him entering Tekken 2 is to hunt down Beikuto-san and get revenge on him. So we'll just say this is another vignette. This is kind of a slice of life. This is something that happened to Law after the tournament that was real. He did train his students in his new dojo. And we'll call it canon because Yoshimitsu's ending kind of backs this up, okay? So let's go to watch the next one. Oh, this is King. Now I want you to watch King's ending. The children that run out of the orphanage, pay very close attention to them because I didn't know this. I read this the other day. It's actually Namco employees. They just shrunk them down to make them look small. But you'll see several of the kids, quote-unquote kids, are wearing like dress khaki pants. And so I think that kind of confirms this rumor. Anyway, let's watch King's ending. What a nostalgia trip. Again, this is... that's probably a real clock they digitized in. I wonder what brand of clock that was. OG King was such a cool guy. I mean, he was just like a luchador, priest, orphanage guy. Yeah, like, see that guy? Those are straight up adults. They've just been shrunken down. It's probably like Namco, and that was probably like the cafeteria worker at Namco there with the apron or something. They're like, hey, you want to be in the game we're making? I mean, look at this. Incredibly goofy. Let's. I think that was going to be canon. Let's double check. Let's go look at King's. And I know you can't see this. I can, but I'll read it to you. King, as they say in Tekken 3. So basically, King is trying to enter the tournament to get prize money to fund the orphanage. He runs into Armor King. I'm not really sure. Okay. According to his Tekken 2 story, and again, there are multiple versions of the Tekken 2 stories, and I didn't know where these came from until somebody pointed it out to me in the comments in an older video. The Tekken 2 website is actually still up, or at least it was a few months ago. It's in Japanese, but it has stories for all the characters, and the stories that it gives are slightly different. It gives a little bit different details than the ones in the manual. Like, for example, the manual just says King helps orphans by managing an orphanage with the money he earns from pro wrestling. Unfortunately, the orphanage is running out of money, and King is turned to heavy drinking. He decides to participate in the tournament to regain the children's hearts and to pull his life together. But the other description says, after winning third place in the first tournament, an orphan died within King's care. Depressed and enraged, King threw away his jaguar mask and ran away. Armor King worried about his rival and went in search of him. After a long, tiring day of searching and finding clues, he found him in an alleyway behind a bar. Armor King saw how his friend's life had crumbled and convinced him to return to the orphanage in order to take care of the kids who were still in need of him. Armor King also convinced him to resume training for the King of Iron Fist Tournament 2. And that seems to be true to me. That doesn't really contradict the manual, but it just gives a little more background. And that seems to be true because in the intro to Tekken 2, We see Armor King approach King in an alley and basically throw the mask at his feet and be like, "Hey, King, it's time to hit that grind, time to get back to work." So I see this as King has won third place in the King of Iron Fist Tournament 1. He comes back to the orphanage, and all the kids who are actually Namco employees are happy to see him. This is kind of a conclusion ending for King, because this is kind of directly what happens afterwards. I kind of want to go back and change that law ending to a conclusion ending, because I think it's a conclusion too. If it happened after he got beat by Wang Jinrei, he went back and did it. The whole conclusion what if thing is kind of confusing, but some endings are definitely more what if. We haven't really done any what ifs yet, but when we get to Tekken 2, we're going to start seeing those what ifs. In particular, Tekken 3, and heaven forbid we do Tekken 4 and 5. There's a lot of what if endings in there. So anyway, let's go back to our next. Got a few more left. Let's do Yoshimitsu. Now this has to be non-canon, because we know Kunimitsu defeated Yoshimitsu in Tekken 1 and 2 and stole his sword. And that's why she was in Tekken 3 and not him. Yeah, and see, there's Law and his family. So Yoshimitsu is never really interested in winning the tournament as much as he is just like stealing money. There's a young Forest Law, I guess. This is obviously in the slums of some city. That's strange. All the endings have different styles. Like some endings, they'll toss the end in there. Like Xiao Yu's is anime. So strange. Anyway, let's go back to our sheet. This is kind of a canon conclusion ending, in my opinion, because this is what happens. This is definitely what happens. Let's go to the Nina ending. Let's check out Nina. And again, we know that Law's ending is canon because he has the dojo, and Yoshimitsu's ending seems to show where he got the money from despite losing to Wang Jinrei. This is one of the few appearances of a sub-boss character in a CGI movie in Tekken 1, because none of the sub-bosses had their own ending, even in the PS1 version. They still haven't figured out walk animations by the time they made the endings, unfortunately. Or lining up sound with a slap correctly either, for that matter. Or hair physics. And then of course Nina had the shoe the whole time. Yeah, this is very much a vignette ending. It's a slice of life. It's just kind of something that shows an event. It could be after the tournament. It could be before the tournament. Although Nina and Anna are usually trying to kill each other, so one of them looking for her shoe in the same location as Nina, that says to me this probably happened before the tournament, because when the tournament comes around, they're just trying to kill each other. Like if you and your sister are trying to kill each other, you're not going to be somewhere without your shoes. You're not going to be like at a hotel with her trying to get dressed. So this is probably from an earlier time in their life when they still had something to do with each other. And that's just my guess for this ending. I love early fighting game endings and trying to sort through the tangled web to figure out what's true. Fortunately, Tekken 1 is making this easy on us. Tekken 2 is not going to be so easy. Tekken 2 is going to be a lot harder. This may be where we have to bust out the partially canon, and I'll tell you why after. Also, Michelle has got some thick calves and ankles and legs in this ending. My goodness. She does the weird Tekken 1 run back to the ranch, and we get the little fin in the bottom right corner there. It's almost like different team members made these endings. So this ending. So in the intro to Tekken 2, we see basically Michelle in the same place. However, it's a complete wreck. There's no scene of her mother, which is her mother is sitting on the porch waiting for her in that ending. I don't believe her mother is shown. I'm going to double check the Tekken 2 ending here, or Tekken 2 intro here. You can see Tekken 2 doesn't even mention this, other than the fact that, yeah, this ending can't be canon, and here's why. The Tekken 2 intro shows the place has been ransacked, and also her Tekken 2 bio says that Kazuya wants the pendant that Michelle wears around her neck since it carries the secret to a great treasure. Michelle's mother has been kidnapped by Kazuya's men to ensure her participation in the tournament. Michelle vows to rescue her mother at all costs. So my guess is what happened. We'll say this is partially canon because Michelle did return home after the tournament. We know that for a fact. But I'm going to call it a what if. Because it's what if basically Michelle had done well at the tournament and went home to meet her mother. But her mother was never there. As we know in Tekken 2, her mother was kidnapped by Kazuya. So basically this is partially true. Michelle did go home to her family, to her mother. I think all she had left was her mother. Because her father was an ex-Mishima Zaibatsu employee, if I remember correctly, who was sent to spy on them and ended up falling in love with her mother. So Michelle went home. The place was ransacked. Her mother was not there. It was a mess because Kazuya had, I guess, done his thing by the time she got home. So she basically smashed the mirror and runs out. I guess you could make the argument that, like, she came home and her mother was there, and then she went somewhere else and came back later by the time Kazuya had cemented his role with the Mishima Zaibatsu. And she came home at that point and it was a wreck. But I don't know, just because of how rapid pace the Tekken story teams to move between tournaments. I swear it's like a new Iron Fist tournament every month in this series. Yeah, I'm going to say... Actually, let's double check something. Let's look up Tekken 2. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, okay. 2 years have passed. The Mishima Zaibatsu under Kazuya's leadership has become more powerful with its tendrils reaching to all corners of the world. So the second tournament takes place 2 years after the first, which means that it's very well possible Michelle came home to her mother, and then 2 years later she was somewhere else and came back and left. That's a tough one. Because her Tekken 2 ending seems to pick up where the other one left off, but I find it really hard to believe that the tournament was just over, Michelle flew home, Kazuya had already taken over, and was like, the first thing he did was like, hey, send somebody to go get Michelle's pendant. Probably not. So with that said, maybe this is canon. So this becomes therefore a conclusion ending, and it is canon. Michelle came home. She found her mother there, and she was happy. And then later, she went out to get milk or cigarettes or something, and came back, and the place was ransacked, and her mother was gone. So you can fight me in the comments over this. I'm going to say this is probably canon, knowing that the second tournament took place 2 years after, and that planes exist. I'm going to assume Michelle got home before it was too late. So let's look at the Jack ending. This is our last ending in Tekken 1. And we'll end the video. We will do Tekken 2 as well. Don't worry. So Jack's ending is kind of tricky because we do know that Jack units are mass produced, but we really have no reason to believe that Jack 1 was mass produced because 2 years later we have Jack 2. So I mean I seem to remember reading somewhere that Jack 1 was destroyed by Prototype Jack because like Heihachi had made like modifications to it and whatever. Let's double check Prototype Jack's page and see if we can figure out. Okay, so according to Prototype Jack's ending, or his story in Tekken 2, he was basically destroyed by the regular Jack, and then Kazuya reactivated him for various reasons to make use of him. So yeah, I think we may have another There's basically nothing to say in the rest of Tekken that this is not true, that the military mass-produced jacks. And this could even be Jak 2. It could be saying because Jak 1 was so successful that we're going to mass-produce it. The interesting thing is if Jak defeated Prototype Jak, because Prototype Jak was on Heihachi's side, like Heihachi entered Prototype Jak in the tournament to defend against Jak, then who defeated Jak? And obviously you're not going to get a breakdown of every character that fought every character in the tournament unless they were like just put each other out of business. But I see no reason for this to not be canon. And we're going to call it a conclusion because it's like, okay, Jak performed to X specification in the tournament. Let's mass produce it, boys. We're ready to go with our line of Jaks. Me and the boys mass producing Jaks. So yeah, this is all the CGI and ending sequences in Tekken 1. We'll do Tekken 2 next, don't fear. But yeah, pretty much if you take a rational approach to this and look at the intros and the data from Tekken 2, there's really no reason any of these endings could not have happened. Obviously some are more important than others, like KAZUYA's ending is big because it leads directly into Tekken 2. The console and arcade intro, they're kind of just fun little things, they don't matter. But the rest of this stuff sets up Tekken 2 pretty well. I guess you could still make an argument that Michelle's ending is not canon, and that when she got there, her mother was kidnapped by KAZUYA. But, you know, KAZUYA would have waited till the tournament to kidnap her mother, and the next tournament wasn't until 2 years later. So it just stands to reason Michelle came home, and everything was GG for a while until close to the time of the second tournament. Because in the intro, we see Michelle, she comes in, the place is a wreck, she smashes a mirror, and she leaves immediately, like heading out the door. So she was probably, because anime, she was probably at the grocery store, and like there was a big advertisement up on the TV. It's like, hey, the King of Iron Fist Tournament 2 has been announced. And when she got home, her mom was gone and her place was ransacked. And she's like, okay, I got to go deal with this. Okay, but that's Tekken 1. Thanks, guys, for watching. I appreciate you greatly, as always. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. If you disagree with me, tell me why. I would love to. If you've got something that contradicts one of these endings, let me know. And I would love to see it and review it, and maybe we'll talk about it in a later video. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Have a great weekend. It's Friday. Have a great weekend.